The chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor as the man stood up without warning. Every head in the room turned. The community hall was hot, crowded and restless, filled with the low hum of side conversations and the impatience of people who had learned not to expect much from meetings like this. Someone near the back muttered, "Here we go again." A woman folded her arms. A teenager pulled out his phone, already half disengaged. The man didn't say anything yet. He adjusted his sleeves slowly, like someone buying time. His clothes were too clean for the room. Not flashy, just deliberate. The kind of outfit that didn't belong to someone used to waiting on folding chairs for promises that never came. At the front of the room, Amara froze mid-sentence. She had been speaking about housing shortages, about young people aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, about the same cycle repeating itself year after year. She was used to people tuning out halfway through. Used to polite nods. Used to silence where action should be. But this felt different. The man looked directly at her, not at the podium, not at the slides behind her, at her. Her throat tightened. He started, then stopped. The pause stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice steady but quiet. I think I know you." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Amara blinked. She scanned his face quickly, instinctively defensive. In her line of work, recognition usually came with expectations, or favors, or strings. "I don't think so," she said carefully. The man nodded, like he'd expected that answer. "That's fair," he said. "You were 9, maybe 10. Her heart skipped once, hard. He swallowed. "You used to eat lunch sitting on the curb, by the east fence." The room faded. The air felt heavier, louder. Her hands gripped the sides of the podium before she realized they were shaking. "That fence had a hole near the bottom," he continued, his voice barely above the hum of the old ceiling fan. "You'd slide the food through, always wrapped in brown paper." Someone laughed nervously. Amara couldn't. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. "I was the kid on the other side," the man said, "the one who never said thank you because I didn't know how to speak to someone who kept saving my life." The silence this time was complete. Amara stepped back from the podium. Her eyes searched his face again, slower now, the scar above his eyebrow, the way his shoulders curved slightly inward like he still expected to be braced for impact. 22 years collapsed in on themselves. "No," she whispered, "that's not possible." He nodded again, eyes glassy now. "I know. I've been telling myself that for years." Her knees felt weak. The moderator cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we can take this offline." "No," Amara said sharply, surprising herself. "No, it's fine." She stepped down from the stage. Each step toward him felt unreal, like walking into a memory she'd tried not to touch for decades. "You disappeared," she said. "I waited for weeks." His jaw clenched. "I didn't choose to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said it. "You gave me your lunch every day for 6 months." The words landed like a weight on her chest. She looked away, blinking hard. It wasn't a big deal. He shook his head immediately. It was everything. The room was holding its breath now, though most of them didn't fully understand why. Amara folded her arms tightly, grounding herself. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I promised you something," he said, "and I didn't forget." The story didn't begin in this room. It began years earlier, on mornings that smelled like damp concrete and burnt toast, in an apartment where the lights flickered and the refrigerator was never full. Amara learned early not to complain. Her grandmother used to say, "You don't waste energy on things you can't change, you change what you can." What Amara could change was how she packed her lunch. Half the sandwich stayed, half went into an extra napkin. The first time she noticed the boy, he was pressed against the school fence, thin arms wrapped around himself, eyes fixed on the kids eating. He didn't ask, he didn't wave, he just watched. She tried to ignore him, she really did. But on the third day, she stood up mid-bite, heart pounding like she was about to break a rule that mattered. "Hey," she whispered through the fence. He flinched. She slid the food through the gap and stepped back quickly, like she was afraid it might burn her. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he ate like someone who didn't know when he'd eat again. The next day, she brought 2 napkins. By the 3rd week, it was routine. They didn't talk much at first. Names came later, stories even later. What started as silence became jokes whispered through metal links, laughter quickly cut short when teachers walked by. One afternoon, rain soaked the ground and soaked her shoes. She waited anyway. "You don't have to," he said hoarsely. She shrugged. "You might be hungrier today." He laughed once. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She never told her grandmother at first, but grandmothers notice everything. "You sharing again?" her grandmother asked one night, handing her a plate with slightly more food than usual. Amara nodded, bracing herself. Her grandmother just sighed. "Then we'll stretch it." That was the lesson, not charity, not pity, just stretching what little you had because someone else needed it too. 6 months later, the fence was empty. No warning, no goodbye. Amara kept bringing the food anyway, until one day she didn't. And life moved on the way it always does, quietly, without closure. Back in the community hall, the man finally said, "My name is Caleb." Amara exhaled shakily. "I'm Amara." "I know," he said softly. "I never forgot." The room erupted then, whispers, questions, disbelief, but neither of them heard it. Because some promises don't age, they wait. They sat across from each other in the small office behind the hall, the noise of the meeting muffled by thin walls that had heard too many arguments and too few victories. A paper cup of water trembled slightly in Amara's hand. She hadn't noticed she was shaking until the water rippled. Caleb noticed. "I didn't mean to ambush you," he said. "I swear, I wasn't even planning to speak." "You stood up like you were about to confess to a crime," she replied, trying to steady her voice. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "In a way, I was." She looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "I've spent most of my life trying to make up for the fact that I survived when I shouldn't have." That landed harder than she expected. Amara leaned back, crossing her arms. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he said immediately. "That's what makes it worse." She studied his face again. The boy she remembered had been all sharp angles and hunger. This man carried the same intensity, but it was buried under control, discipline, money. "So," she said, choosing her words carefully, "what happened after you stopped coming?" Caleb looked down at his hands. "They moved me, a shelter across town, no warning. One morning I woke up and the place was empty. Different walls, different rules." "Did you ever try to come back?" she asked. "Every day," he said. "For a while." Her chest tightened. "I waited." "I know," he whispered. "I stood across the street sometimes, but I didn't have food anymore, didn't have bus fare, didn't even know if you'd still be there." She shook her head slowly. "I thought you forgot." "I thought you'd moved on," he replied. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of all the wrong assumptions pressing down between them. "You know," Amara said quietly, "after you disappeared, things got harder." Caleb nodded. "They usually do." She told him about the foster homes, the good ones that didn't last, the bad ones that lasted too long, the way birthdays became paperwork and affection became conditional. "They kept saying I was resilient," she said, "like it was a compliment, like I chose it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And you?" she asked. "What happened to you?" He hesitated. "You want the clean version or the real one?" "Try the real one," she said. "I was angry," he admitted, "all the time. At first I didn't understand why you'd helped me. I thought you were just temporary." Her brows furrowed. "Temporary?" "Like everything else," he said. "I kept waiting for the moment you'd stop showing up. So when you didn't, it messed with me." She let out a soft breath. "You were a kid." "So were you," he replied, "but you fed me anyway." That sentence sat between them like a truth neither of them could deny. "I learned to code because it was quiet," he continued. "Computers didn't ask questions. They didn't care where I slept. They just worked if you learned the rules." "And you learned them," she said, obsessively. Amara tilted her head. "Is that how you became you?" He smiled faintly. "That's how I survived. The rest came later." She leaned forward now. Why search for me all these years? He met her gaze. Because you were the first person who treated me like I was worth the effort. Her throat tightened again. I didn't want to give you money, he added quickly. I mean, I do, but that's not... I wanted you to know that what you did mattered, that it didn't disappear. Amara stood abruptly, pacing the small room. You know how many people think kindness is a weakness? Yes, Caleb said softly. I built an entire company proving them wrong. She stopped, turned back to him. Then why do you look like you're still apologizing? He exhaled. Because I promised you something through a fence when I was starving, and it took me 22 years to find you again. Her laugh came out sharper than intended. You promised to marry me. He blinked. You remember that? Of course I do, she said. You said it like it was a business plan. I meant it like a goal, he replied. The room went quiet again. Caleb, she said gently, I don't need saving. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the door. You came to hear about the program? Yes. Then listen, she said, not as someone who made it, but as someone who remembers what it felt like not to. He nodded. I can do that. Over the next hour, she laid it all out. The gaps, the failures, the youth who aged out of care with trash bags holding their lives, the ones who disappeared from statistics because no one followed up. Caleb didn't interrupt once. When she finished, he said, What do you need? She hesitated. Not money alone. Good, he said, because money without structure is just noise. A small smile tugged at her lips. You really did grow up. I had a good example, he replied. They walked back into the hall together, heads turned again. This time, whispers followed them openly. Amara stepped back to the microphone. I want to say something, she announced, and I need you all to listen, not clap. The room stilled. Tonight isn't about nostalgia, she continued, it's about responsibility. And about what happens when people who know the system from the inside build something better. She gestured toward Caleb. He's not here to fix us. He's here to fund what we already know needs to exist. Caleb felt every eye on him now. And I'm not here to be a symbol, Amara added. I'm here to work. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Caleb stepped forward. If you're watching this later, he said, glancing instinctively toward the camera at the back of the room, and you've ever wondered whether small acts matter, stay with this story. A beat. And if you believe in what she's building, he added, you should be paying attention. The room erupted in applause. Amara leaned toward him and whispered, You just asked them to care. He smiled faintly. It worked on me. And somewhere in the audience, a teenager who had already learned not to hope leaned forward in his chair. The next morning, Amara woke before her alarm, her chest tight with the unfamiliar feeling of anticipation mixed with fear. She lay still for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building wake up around her. Pipes rattling, footsteps above, a distant siren fading into the city. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fence again. The rusted metal, the small hands pushing food through. The boy's face lifting like he didn't trust what he was seeing. She sat up and rubbed her face. Get it together, she muttered to herself. By the time she arrived at the community center, Caleb was already there. He was standing outside, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, talking to a group of volunteers like someone who didn't want to look important. When he saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. Morning, he said carefully, like he wasn't sure what tone he was allowed to use yet. Morning, she replied. You didn't have to come this early. I know, he said. I wanted to. She nodded once. Good. They walked inside together. The day unfolded fast, too fast. Meetings blurred into one another. Whiteboards filled with ideas, then crossed out. Numbers thrown around, then challenged. Amara watched closely, half expecting Caleb to default to control, to dominance, to the kind of leadership that steamrolled quieter voices. He didn't. Instead, he asked questions. What happens to them after 6 months? Who decides eligibility? What does failure look like, and how do we respond when it happens? At one point, Amara stopped him. Why do you care about the details so much? He didn't hesitate, because I was the detail everyone ignored. That shut the room up. Later, as the volunteers filtered out, Amara stayed behind, packing up papers. Caleb lingered, leaning against the table. "You're good at this," he said. She snorted. "I'm tired. That's different." "No," he said, "you don't romanticize the struggle. You respect it." She looked at him then, really looked. "You're not here for a headline, are you?" He shook his head. "I've had headlines. They don't last." "Then what are you here for?" He took a breath. "To build something that would have saved us." The word us landed softly, but it stayed. Over the next few weeks, they worked side by side. Not romantically, not awkwardly, carefully. They argued about structure, about funding priorities, about whether trauma counseling should be optional or mandatory. "You can't force healing," Amara insisted, "and you can't pretend it happens on its own," Caleb shot back. They compromised. Slowly, the program took shape. Transitional housing first, always housing first. Paid apprenticeships instead of unpaid internships. Caseworkers with lived experience, metrics that measured dignity, not just output. One night, long after everyone else had gone home, they sat on the floor eating takeout, backs against the wall. "You ever think about how weird this is?" Amara asked. "All the time," Caleb said. She smiled faintly. "I mean, if you hadn't been hungry that day." "If you hadn't been brave," he corrected. She shook her head. "I was scared." "So was I," he said. "That didn't stop either of us." Silence settled between them, comfortable this time. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Being hungry," he said. "Or surviving?" She winced. "Sorry," he considered it. "No, because hunger taught me what fullness actually means." She absorbed that quietly. The launch day came faster than expected. Cameras showed up. Officials smiled too wide. Promises were made publicly that Amara knew would be forgotten privately. As she stepped up to speak, her hands trembled again. But this time not from fear. "This isn't charity," she said into the microphone. "This is repair." The crowd murmured. "These young people don't need saving," she continued. "They need systems that stop abandoning them." Applause followed, cautious but real. Caleb watched from the side, chest tight. Later that night, the first residents moved in. One of them, a boy barely 18, stood frozen in the doorway of his room, staring at the bed like it might disappear. "This is yours," Amara told him gently. He whispered, "For how long?" "As long as you need," she said. Caleb turned away so no one would see his face. The first setback came 3 weeks later. A resident didn't show up for check-in. Then another. Panic rippled through the team. "We lost them," someone said. "No," Amara replied firmly, "we didn't." They found one at a friend's place, the other at the hospital. They adjusted the system, added flexibility, added follow-ups. Caleb watched it all with something close to awe. "You don't quit," he said to her one night. She laughed tiredly. "I didn't get the option." Months passed, success stories surfaced, so did critics. "You're wasting money. You're enabling dependence." Caleb responded once, publicly. "Dependence on stability is not a weakness." The comment went viral. If you're watching this story right now and you've ever been told that caring too much is naive, stay with it. This is where things get harder. Because 6 months in, something unexpected happened. The numbers spoke. No returns to homelessness, high retention, employment rising. The skeptics went quiet. The people who mattered leaned in. One evening, after a long day, Amara found Caleb standing outside the old school lot, the one where the fence used to be. "They tore it down," he said. She stood beside him. "Good." He hesitated. "I never thanked your grandmother." "She'd say you don't thank people for doing what's right," Amara replied. "You just do it again." He smiled softly. "And if you're still watching," he added quietly, glancing at the camera crew setting up across the street, "this is the part where stories usually end." "But ours didn't," Amara said, "not even close." The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as attention. At first it was invitations, panels, interviews, requests to tell the story. Caleb declined most of them. Amara declined all of them. "We're not the headline," she said. "The work is." But attention has a way of bending reality. Funding partners began asking for projections instead of people. City officials wanted timelines that ignored trauma. A board member suggested cutting counseling hours to optimize cost efficiency. Amara slammed her notebook shut. If we do that, we're just building prettier exits back to the same hell. The room went silent. Caleb watched her, pulse quickening. He recognized that tone. It was the same one she'd used at the fence when a teacher had yelled at her for loitering. "I'm not negotiating dignity," she added. Later that night, Caleb found her alone in the office, staring at the wall. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't turn. "Do you know what scares me?" He stepped closer. "Tell me." "That we'll succeed," she said, "and they'll still try to turn it into something shallow." He leaned against the doorframe. "Then we don't let them." She laughed bitterly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said, "but neither was starving. And we survived that." She finally looked at him. "We're not those kids anymore." "No," he agreed, "but we remember them. That's the advantage." The real test came with Marcus. Marcus was 19. Brilliant, guarded, angry in a way that stayed quiet until it didn't. He'd aged out of care 2 weeks before joining the program. At first he thrived, then he missed curfew, then 2. Then he stopped answering messages. The staff panicked. "We can't make exceptions," someone argued. "Rules are rules." Amara shook her head. "Rules are tools, not punishments." Caleb said nothing, but his chest tightened. He remembered the feeling of slipping. How fast one missed day could become a lost year. They found Marcus sitting on the front steps at dawn. "You gonna kick me out?" Marcus asked flatly. "No," Amara said. "We're gonna ask why you left." Marcus stared at the ground. "Because every time things get quiet, I expect them to disappear." Caleb swallowed hard. That night, Amara cried in the bathroom for the first time in months. Caleb waited outside, leaning against the sink, hands clenched. "I don't know if I can carry all of this," she said through the door. "Some days it feels like I'm 9 again, just pretending I know what I'm doing." "You did know," he said softly. "You knew how to care." The door opened. She looked exhausted. "That doesn't feel like enough." He met her eyes. "It was enough for me." Silence stretched. Something unspoken lived there now. Not romance, not yet. Something deeper, recognition, trust, the kind that made walking away impossible. The backlash came soon after. A viral post accused the program of favoritism. Another claimed Caleb was using his wealth to buy redemption. Caleb stared at his phone late into the night, jaw clenched. "Don't respond," Amara said from the couch. "That's what they want." "I know," he said, "but they're not wrong about one thing." She looked up. "What?" "I am trying to redeem something," he admitted. "I just don't think it's a sin." She considered him carefully. "Then don't apologize for it." The pressure took its toll. Caleb began sleeping less. Amara began eating less. They snapped at each other over small things. "You don't need to be everywhere," she said one evening, "and you don't need to carry this alone," he shot back. They stood there breathing hard. "I'm not asking you to fix me," she said. "I'm not trying to," he replied. "I'm trying to stand with you." The argument ended not with resolution, but exhaustion. Weeks later, the program crossed a milestone. Hundreds served, 0 returns to homelessness, data that couldn't be ignored. The same officials who doubted them now asked for meetings. The same critics asked for interviews. Amara declined again, but this time Caleb spoke. "This work doesn't belong to me," he said into the camera. "And it doesn't belong to her. It belongs to the people who were told they didn't matter." The clip spread. Donations surged. Requests to replicate the model poured in. One night, after a particularly long day, they sat on the hood of Caleb's car outside the center. "You ever think about stopping?" Amara asked. He laughed softly. "Every day. You?" "Yes," she admitted, "and then I remember the faces." He nodded. "Same." She hesitated. "Caleb, why didn't you ever reach out sooner, when you got successful?" He looked away. "Because I was afraid you'd hate what I became." She frowned. "Why would I?" "Because I escaped," he said, "and you stayed to fight." She stepped closer. "You didn't escape. You came back." The words hit him harder than any headline ever had. The next morning, Amara received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Brooks?" the voice asked. "This is the city council." Her stomach dropped. They wanted to expand, fast, too fast. They wanted scale without soul. Amara hung up and stared at the wall. "They'll ruin it," she said quietly. Caleb stood beside her. "Only if we let them." She turned to him. "This could cost you everything." He met her gaze. "It already gave me everything." That night, standing in the empty hall, Amara finally said it. "I don't know how this ends." Caleb nodded. "Neither do I." "But," she added, "I know how it started." He smiled. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, two people stood at the edge of something much bigger than either of them. And if you've stayed this far into the story, you already know, the hardest part isn't building something, it's protecting it. The expansion almost broke them. What had started as a careful, human-sized system suddenly attracted timelines, deadlines, and people who spoke in bullet points instead of names. Conference calls replaced kitchen table planning. Legal documents replaced whiteboards. Words like scalability and replicability floated through rooms where pain used to be spoken plainly. Amara hated it. "This isn't bread," she said during one meeting, palms flat against the table. "You can't mass-produce trust." A consultant smiled politely. "With respect, impact requires speed." "With respect," she replied, her voice tight. "Speed is how people get lost." Caleb watched the exchange, feeling the familiar tension between power and restraint. He knew how easily money could bulldoze intention. He also knew that walking away now would leave the program vulnerable. After the meeting, he followed Amara outside. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. She stared across the street at a bus stop where a young woman sat hugging a backpack to her chest. "That was me once," Amara said quietly, "and nobody asked me to scale my pain." Caleb nodded. "Then we don't let them." "They won't back down," she said. "They never do." "Then neither will we," he replied. The argument that finally cracked them came late one night. They were alone in the office, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and open laptops. Amara rubbed her temples. "You can't keep putting your name on everything," she said. "It makes this fragile." "And you can't keep pretending your name doesn't already carry weight," Caleb shot back. She stood up abruptly. "I don't want this to be about us." "It already is," he said, standing too, "whether we like it or not." Her eyes flashed. "I didn't ask for this." "Neither did I," he replied, voice rising, "but I didn't run from it." The words hung in the air, sharp and unfair. Amara's face fell. "You think I'm running?" "I think you're scared," he said immediately, softer now. "And I don't blame you." She turned away, arms crossed tightly around herself. "You don't get to decide how I protect myself." "I know," he said. "I just don't want to lose you in the process." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It took days before they spoke again. In that time, the program continued without them. Staff handled crises. Residents thrived and struggled. Life didn't pause for unresolved feelings. Then came the gala. Amara didn't want to go. "I hate rooms full of people congratulating themselves," she muttered, adjusting a borrowed dress. Caleb smiled faintly. "I'll stand in the corner with you." "You don't stand in corners," she said. "Tonight I do." The room buzzed with money and optimism. Screens played highlight reels, success stories edited into neat arcs. Amara watched from the side, arms folded. "They make it look easy," she said. Caleb followed her gaze. "They didn't show the nights you cried." She glanced at him. "They didn't show the nights you almost quit." He smiled sadly. "Those don't test well." When Caleb's turn to speak came, he walked to the stage slowly. "I was asked to talk about impact," he began, "but impact isn't what changed my life." The room quieted. "What changed my life was one person who didn't know she was being watched." Amara's breath caught. "She didn't fix my problems. She didn't ask my story. She shared what little she had and walked away." He paused. "That's the model," he said. "Not control, not charity, care." The applause was thunderous. Later that night, outside under string lights, Caleb found Amara alone. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot," he said. She shook her head. "You didn't." They stood there, the noise of the party muffled behind them. "Caleb," she said quietly, "why did you really come back?" He hesitated. "Because I never stopped being that kid. I just got better clothes." She smiled softly. "You're still hungry." He met her eyes. "So are you." They laughed then, the tension finally easing. "I don't know what this is," Amara said. "Us, this. I'm not asking you to define it," he replied. "I'm asking you to let it exist." She considered him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. The word felt heavier than any promise. Months passed. The program expanded carefully, on their terms. New locations. New leaders trained from within, systems built with memory, not ego. Then one afternoon, Caleb asked Amara to walk with him. They returned to the empty lot where the school once stood. A playground now occupied the space. Children laughed where silence used to live. Caleb took a breath. "This is where it started." She nodded, eyes shining. "I know." He reached into his pocket, not rushing. "I don't want to promise you something impossible," he said. "I don't want to save you, or complete you, or rewrite the past." She watched him closely. "I want to walk forward," he continued, "with you, if you'll let me." He knelt. The world seemed to hold still. Amara covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "Yes," she whispered, "yes." They didn't notice the small crowd that had gathered. They didn't hear the cheers, all they saw was each other. And if you've stayed with this story this long, you can probably feel it too, the moment when kindness stops being memory and becomes legacy. The wedding wasn't announced. No press release, no interviews, no branded moments. It happened on a quiet morning, just as the sun reached over the low buildings and touched the ground where the school used to stand. The playground was still empty. Dew clung to the metal bars. Somewhere nearby, a train passed, loud and ordinary and alive. Amara stood at the edge of the lot, smoothing the fabric of her dress with nervous hands. It wasn't white, it wasn't elaborate, it was practical, like her. Something she could move in. "You okay?" Caleb asked gently. She nodded, then shook her head. "Ask me again in 10 minutes. He smiled. Fair. There were no rows of chairs, no stage, just people who had been part of the work, staff, former residents, a few volunteers, a grandmother's old friend who insisted on bringing food even though everyone told her not to worry about it. When Amara walked forward, she didn't look at the crowd, she looked at Caleb. And he looked at her like the world had finally caught up to a promise he'd been carrying his whole life. "I don't need you to save me," she said quietly when they reached each other. "I know," he replied. "I don't need you to make me safe," she continued. "I know. I need you to stay," she finished. "I will," he said without hesitation. They didn't exchange long vows. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been lived. When they kissed, the applause that followed didn't feel performative. It felt earned. Later, as people drifted away and children began to fill the playground, Amara sat on a bench watching a boy climb the jungle gym. He slipped. A girl beside him reached out, steadying him without thinking. Amara smiled, eyes wet. Caleb sat next to her. "You okay?" She nodded. "I just realized something." "What?" "We didn't change the world," she said. "We just made it easier for some people to survive it." Caleb considered that. That's how real change works. The years that followed were quieter than anyone expected. The program grew, but slowly, carefully. It refused shortcuts. Each new location trained leaders from within the community. Each decision passed through the same question Amara asked every time. Does this help the kid behind the fence? If the answer wasn't yes, it didn't happen. They made mistakes, they corrected them, they lost some people, they found others. The numbers climbed, but they were never the headline. What mattered were the moments no one filmed. A young woman calling Amara just to say she got her first apartment. A former resident sending Caleb a picture of his graduation cap. A note left on the office door that simply read, "Thank you for not giving up on me." One evening, years later, Caleb found Amara sitting alone in the center's common room, lights low. "You remember the first time we argued?" she asked suddenly. He laughed softly. "Which one?" "The big one," she said, "when I thought this was going to break us." "And?" he asked. She shrugged. "It almost did." "But it didn't," he said. No, she agreed, because we didn't pretend it was easy. He reached for her hand. That fence taught us something. What? She asked. That love doesn't announce itself, he said. It just shows up again tomorrow. They sat in silence after that, the kind that didn't need filling. Years later, when someone asked Caleb how it felt to be known for something good, he answered honestly. It's strange, he said, because the best thing I ever did wasn't impressive at all. I just accepted a sandwich. When someone asked Amara how it felt to see her work replicated across cities, she smiled gently. It's not my work, she said. It's what happens when people stop assuming help has to be loud. The story never ended the way stories usually do. There was no final triumph, no perfect system, just continuity, just people helping people in ways that didn't make headlines. One afternoon, long after the cameras had moved on, a little girl sat on the playground steps eating lunch. A boy stood nearby watching. Amara noticed first. She didn't rush over. She didn't intervene. She just watched as the girl tore her sandwich in half and held it out. The boy hesitated, then took it. Caleb felt her hand squeeze his. Full circle, he whispered. No, Amara said softly. Forward. And if you've stayed with this story until now, if something in it felt familiar, or uncomfortable, or hopeful, don't let it end here. Because stories like this don't survive on views alone, they survive when people talk about them. So if this moved you even a little, take a second to like the video, subscribe so you don't miss the next story, and leave a comment telling us where you saw kindness change a life. Someone else might need to read it, just like a boy once needed a sandwich.